The show goes on. Welcome to the official show on the Fish on First podcast channel, presented by MPT College Consulting. Eli Sussman here with you, Isaac Azut alongside me. First time in a while that you've heard me on the mic for one of these extended interviews, but I'm optimistic that it will have been well worth the wait considering who we have joining us this time. He served as president of the Marlins for half of the franchise's existence. He's here to weigh on the past, the present, the future of the Fish. The host of Nothing Personal with David Samson. It is David Samson. Really eager to pick your brain, David, on a whole lot of topics. So thanks a lot for coming on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's great to be here. I've seen a picture of Marlins Park, now loanDepot Park. It makes me smile. Unfortunately, of course, I miss it. I miss Florida. I miss the team. I miss the ballpark. It is life goes on. But then when you say I was there for half of the franchise existence, I would assume that is that obviously won't be the case for much longer, but it's special. I loved running the team and being a part of that community, and all the way from winning the World Series to the horrific fire sale trading of players. Everything from A to Z is what makes an experience, and it's good to be on here.
Well, we want to start off with a contemporary topic. You have a long time friendship with Jeff Conine. And finally, a second-generation Miami Marlin, his son, Griffin Conine, just got called up earlier this week. He's played the last few games for the team in Colorado, and he's gotten off to a very good start right there. Can you just take us back to your earliest memories of meeting a young Griffin and what it's like watching somebody like that play in a major league game? It's got to be a different relationship than you have with watching any other major league player.
It's been interesting for me because I'm now of the age, shockingly, where I've had second-generation players. Don't forget, when I was with the Expos, I had Vladdy Guerrero Sr., and Vladdy Guerrero Jr. was rumbling around, as a 2-year-old, hitting wiffle balls further than I could, drive a car. So I've watched as kids have become men and become professional baseball players, and believe me, it's strange. Now, you talk about Griffin Conine, who I was like an uncle. He was not a baseball player. He was a rebellious skateboard-loving kid who didn't want to play baseball, didn't care that his dad played baseball. And then one day he said, you know what? I'm going to pick up a bat. I may want to play. And it became his obsession. He became a big leaguer day by day, hour by hour, with a level of commitment that, frankly, Niner never had. The discipline that Griffin has, Jeff did not have. The skill that Griffin has, Jeff Conine did not have. Griffin Conine is a better player than Jeff in every single tool. And I say that knowing that Jeff Conine is Mr. Marlin. Jeff Conine has 2 rings. Jeff Conine is a dear, dear personal friend who I love very much, who we've gone through it all together. It's not even close. And Griffin could not get it together, cut down his strikeouts, figure out a way to be mentally strong enough to take the next step. And now he has. And it is so great for Jeff to see the way he feels. He can't even articulate to me what it feels like to see his son be a big leaguer and put it together the way he has, except, and I end with this about Griffin. He's done the easy part. As hard as that's been, it's way harder to stay than it is to get to the big leagues. And we would tell all the young players that. And Griffin's not young. So it is going to be really hard for him to stay as a big leaguer. And don't be fooled by the first 2 games in Colorado, the triple, the double. He's slugging, 1,500. He ended game recently with a double play. It's going to happen. And the way we would judge young players is not when they're 2 for 3, not when they're hitting home runs and triples and doubles. It's when they're 0 for 12. Tell me how he reacts to that. And I hope that Griffin reacts well, and I hope he gets the chance he deserves.
Yeah. Well, David, you said on Nothing Personal, you promised you're going to see him play before the season ends. Do you stand by that? Do you have a date picked out for what would be your first time at a Marlins game since your presidency ended?
So not only first time at a Marlins game, I haven't been to a baseball game since October of 2017. And I went to enough baseball games from 2000 to 2017 to last about 25 lifetimes, but I haven't been to one. So I do want to come see Griffin play. I was supposed to be in Colorado, but literally his first game was the day my son was moving into college, and I could not be there for Griffin. I am going to find my way to Florida to get to a game. I'm hoping it's next week. That is my plan, and I want to. It's it's funny you asked that. Am I just going to buy a ticket and walk in and sit in the stands? I guess so. I certainly have a ticket left. Maybe Griffin will leave me a ticket at will call. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to text Griffin and say, hey, I need 2 for blank. Put me on the list, and I'll sit in the family section. Hell yeah. Now we've got a plan. Or maybe I'll sit in the Diamond Club. But yes, I do want to see him play, and I think it's going to be interesting when I go back into that stadium. It will be a flood of emotions, and there will be it'll be interesting.
David, I wanted to get your opinion on just the job that President of Baseball Operations Peter Bendix has done thus far. You've seen him deal with trade deadline. You've seen him deal with the draft. I'm just curious how you'd evaluate his first 8 to 10 months so far of running this ball club.
I think that his reputation in the game is that it's unclear whether he has the ability to be a number one. He's a fantastically brilliant mind, but it's funny to be a president of baseball operations. Make no mistake, it's not a collection of nerds. You can't do that. It's a huge business, and I say nerds lovingly. It's a huge business that you're running when you're a president of baseball operations. It's a huge people business, and it is a huge financial business. It requires myriad skills, and I haven't seen Peter with the ability to manifest all of the skills required to be a top, long-lasting president of baseball operations. He may have the ability to get Bruce to do what he wants and build the team the way he watched it get built in Tampa. There's something, though, different. Stu Sternberg, the owner of the Rays, is different than Bruce Sherman, the owner of the Marlins. What worked in Tampa worked not just because of the brilliance of the executives, but the acquiescence of the owner. And I'm not convinced that Bruce Sherman and the other partners in Miami, who have lost so many games and so much money, and they say so clearly, we want to model ourselves after the Tampa Bay Rays. Hiring Peter Bendix to them was the first step in modeling themselves after the Rays. The problem is they've missed the point. To be the Rays, they've got to be an owner like Stu Sternberg, and they're not. Could they change? I've never seen owners change in my career. Is it impossible? No. Is it likely? No. Does that mean that Peter will fail? Yes.
Well, you did say, I think this was right after Kim Ng parted ways with the team, that they would be better off with a new voice in there or somebody else new in that position. So do you still have conviction about that, or is it just it's more
never
the same?
I have complete conviction, and I don't want to be. Well, I'm just going to say it. I've said it. She was never the GM. That's just, you can put her on the cover of whatever magazine you want. You can have her be the whatever face of baseball you want. Kim Ng was not making the decisions within the Marlins organization. They can deny it all they want, but the people there know the truth. That doesn't mean she's incapable. It doesn't mean any of that. It doesn't mean I don't want women to have that job. I absolutely do. But Kim Ng was not that person. And that is very proving to be true when you will see whether or not she becomes the president of baseball operations for another team. That said, the new voice that I really was referring to, the way that things will get better is the elimination of Jeter, who's gone, of Denbo, who's gone. Could Peter be the beacon of light working together with Bruce Sherman? We got to wait to see. You can't evaluate his trade deadline right now. You can't say that, oh, Trevor Rogers was sent to the minor leagues by the Orioles. What a brilliant trade because Norby's got a 12-game hitting streak. No one who runs a baseball team evaluates a trade like that. So it's going to take a minute here to figure out whether or not he can do, Peter, what he says he can do. We'll find out.
Yeah, and one of those trades that he did make involved Jazz Chisholm Jr. And I wanted to get your take on just that report. Many reports when they were trying to trade him at this deadline, the reports about his quote unquote personality, his brashness, and I just wanted to get your take because to me, how legitimate is that concern? You know, there's a lot of teams that employ guys that aren't exactly clubhouse saints, and I'm just curious, was that
Yeah,
a
I'm
little
one
bit
of
of
them.
was that like a strategic move to maybe get the price down of for Jazz, or was that a legitimate concern by other GMs not wanting to have Jazz and his personality in that clubhouse?
Jazz was never going to work in Miami. It just was not. And I think if there's one city and one team where Jazz has a chance to reach his potential, it's with the Yankees, because Giancarlo and Aaron, and Anthony Rizzo, they're not going to put up with somebody who's hitting 250 and someone who is thinking that there's something they're not. I've watched Giancarlo Stanton around players who come in thinking that they are the king of the world and they stink and they haven't proven a thing. And he doesn't suffer fools gladly. So if there's one clubhouse where Jazz, he's not the main guy, not the star, he is not coming in there to save the day for the Yankees at all. He is not supposed to do that. You've seen him struggle at third base, normal. You've seen him hit home runs. He's got those abilities. There's no doubt about that. But I think the Yankees were the only destination for Jazz. Other teams just didn't want to put up with his baggage. And believe me, that was known in the industry. He was not well appreciated or liked within the Marlins organization from top to bottom. And so the fact that they were able to extract any sort of value for him as he was starting to get more expensive is a net positive for the Marlins, no matter how hot a start he is off to in New York. So I found that trade. Listen, I wouldn't have done the original trade. I don't like trading pitching for position players, and I've done it before, but I don't like doing it. Having Zach Gallen in the rotation, I've traded so many young pitchers in my day, but man, they're gold. And having Zach Gallen good and cheap and not hurt, we're wasting a year of Sandy, and we're off the subject. But anyway, when Sandy gets better, he's going to be more expensive. And so it's so critical to have had him healthy now versus later. We'll see. We'll see. There's so many we'll sees with the Marlins, but don't fret. Every organization has will sees. Trust me.
Just a little bit more on Jazz from somebody that was in your perspective. He had that very valuable, intangible quality to get fans excited for him, to be just so marketable very inherently.
Nope.
However he conducts
I'm
himself.
sorry.
That doesn't factor into the equation for you.
It didn't translate. What you're saying is totally anecdotal. It's like saying that people, bought tickets to watch Hanley Ramirez. People didn't buy tickets even to watch Giancarlo Stanton. There's no incremental benefit. Jazz was not selling tickets. He may have gotten good media attention on social media, but executives and salespeople do not make the mistake of thinking that Twitter is life. And the excitement around videos and TikToks, that is not monetization for a team. Monetization is manifested through season tickets and individual tickets and sponsorship revenue. The Marlins made the playoffs. They got crushed financially. People were not coming. They did not sign up the next year to buy season tickets. Oh, but the team wasn't helped. Enough of the excuses, both for fans and for management. There is an issue with the finances in Miami, and that was a factor for sure in the Jazz trade.
Do you have a high school student going through the college application process? At MPT College Consulting, they strive to make things as stress-free for the family as possible. This includes preparation for standardized testing, guidance through high school, assistance with essays and application, and choosing the right college. Their work is always geared toward the specific needs of the individual client. Just visit them today at mptcollegeconsulting.com to learn more about their services and schedule a free consultation. Well, one thing that indirectly helps those finances, the World Baseball Classic coming back to Miami, and not just coming back, but Miami being the primary host for the tournament as they were in 2023. The format for the schedule just came out for what will ultimately be only 15 games, but if it's anything like the 2023 version, like it's most of those games are sold out. Most of those games are very high demand sellouts. How do you even go about like estimating what the financial impact for this tournament is on the Marlins and how maybe?
Thank you for asking. That's easy. We do that. So I hosted the WBC, and it's very simple. We know exactly what our expenses are to put on these events. We know exactly the percentage of revenue we get because the ticket prices are set by baseball. We have a P&L for the World Baseball Classic before it starts. And just so you know, the total profit, lest you all think that we can sign, I'm using we, it's they, lest you think they're in the market to sign Juan Soto because of the WBC. The net profit from hosting the World Baseball Classic, if all of the world aligns and everything is just coming up roses, maybe 5 to 10 million, and that's in a world of perfection. So it is not the boon to your team's bottom line that you think, which is why what you do is what the Marlins are doing, and I did it too. If you want to go to the WBC, you got to buy season tickets to the Marlins. We've all tried that. Everybody tries that. And guess what? We found that we could go public and say, man, why aren't people coming to Marlins games when they fill up the ballpark to watch the DR against Venezuela? Where are they all when it's the Marlins against the Pirates on a Tuesday in August? It's a different event. It's like asking people at a sold-out Drake concert, why aren't you there for Hank Williams? It's just not comparable. So the Marlins hosting WBC is great for loanDepot Park. It's great for Miami. It's great for the fans. It's great for the players, which is why Miami's chosen as a site. It always was a site going back to pro player. But if you think that it adds up to a change in how payroll is done in Miami for the Marlins, it's just not the case.
David, I wanted to get your opinion on something that I've been outspoken about for a little bit. You've obviously hosted a few World Baseball Classics. You've been president while these tournaments have gone on. I'm just curious, how did you feel about your players participating in this tournament, knowing that it happened during spring training, knowing that your pitchers are going from backfields, couple of innings, to World Series environments so early in spring? Were you ever uneasy about letting some of your pitchers go out and play in this tournament?
Every day. I was on the international committee when I was president of the Marlins, and I had to publicly say, I love the World Baseball Classic. It's the perfect time of year. This is exactly what the game needs. We're going to grow the game. Screw you, Olympics. We're going to show you that we're a global sport, and we're going to make it exciting. Meanwhile, in back rooms, I'm talking to Beinfest or Hill or Jennings saying, God damn it, I cannot believe that we are going to have our players playing in this where they're going to get all lathered up this early in March. Yeah. And they don't start as early as they need to be in February to get that lathered in March. Am I worried anytime a player is running to first base that they're going to pull a hammy? I don't care. I'm going to say this and it's going to come out wrong. I'm not paid to care whether the U.S. or the Dominican wins the World Baseball Classic. I want a World Series. I want to host playoff games because that's how we're going to make money, and that's how we're going to get rings, and that's how we're going to increase the value of our team. The U.S. winning the WBC because my player is starring on the team doesn't do one thing for me or our team.
Yep.
That's the quiet part out loud, and I am not the only person who thinks that way. I may be the only person who says it, though.
I completely agree with you. And it's something that I'm curious about is why apparently it's not up to the teams to allow or disallow their players to participate. Why is that? You know, their employer is allowing, shouldn't it be up to the employer or franchise to let them play?
We are involved. That's not true, actually.
Okay.
We do get to give permission for players.
Is that just if they're on the IL with the season before or in general?
Well, we have a way that we can immediately say no.
Okay.
So if a player's coming off an injury or if there's been overuse, there's different criteria where you can just say no. But if you are allowed to say yes, you don't have to say yes. Rob Manfred and Bud Selig would spend hours on the phone calling owners and presidents. Hey, how come you're giving us a hard time about player X? We need these players. Come on. And it's sort of like a A nuclear power plant. You want the power, just not in your backyard. We all love the idea of the World Baseball Classic. We just don't want it to be our players.
Right.
I wanted to ask one more question now about the current team. One of these storylines coming down the stretch is the expiring deal of Skip Schumaker. And I think you and us are on the same page here. That seems unlikely that Skip is going to come back. He's a pending free agent right here and now working underneath the front office that didn't bring him in the first place. How would you handle that for somebody that is well regarded publicly, who was the reigning National League Manager of the Year? If he's coming to the end of his deal, like what sort of messaging do you put out there? When do you make it official that he's out of the situation? And what do you think the Marlins are going to do? Is he just going to quietly walk away at the end of the year, or is there going to be some sort of advance notice, you think?
In a dream scenario, word wouldn't have gotten out that his option was terminated because that was his last day as manager of the Marlins. Let's just be very clear. He's not coming back to be the manager of the Marlins, and that is mutual. But publicly, what they're going to say the day after the final game of the season is they will have messaging where Skip is appreciative toward Bruce for the opportunity. Bruce is appreciative to Skip, and that Bruce acknowledges that Skip wanted to move on. Skip acknowledges thankful. He's thankful for the opportunity, but excited for future opportunities that exist. Skip is out in the market. He's not just going to not be a manager next year. He knows there's tampering that goes on with managers way before this date in August. There is clear path for what he wants to do. And that path was manifested when he did not want this option and the Marlins did not want this option for next year. So I believe that you will find unanimity and commonality of interest between the team and the manager. If dueling statements come out and there's anger and vitriol, that means something went terribly wrong, and I just don't see that happening.
Right. Well, David, you made a lot of trades in your tenure as president of the Miami Marlins. What we want to know are the trades that didn't happen, that did not come to fruition, some of the spicier trades or free agent signings that were very close, that were on the final steps, but just didn't end up happening.
I mean, the biggest one is one I've talked about before, but I love to talk about. We had Jose Fernandez traded to the Diamondbacks. It was done. And I mean done until Ken Kendrick, the owner of the Diamondbacks, said no. We had agreed to that trade. We had all the players ready. We were ready to exchange medicals. We had the most interesting memory of a trade was obviously the Blue Jays trade of 2012, where the Blue Jays called and said, hey, Josh Johnson failed his physical. And we said, hey, so does Henderson Alvarez. What do you want to do? These guys, their arms are about to fall off. And Anthopoulos at the time had the trade had been announced, basically. And so they were screwed, and we had to get rid of the money. We were screwed. And so we both decided we'd get screwed together, which doesn't happen often in trades. Mostly one side or the other benefits. Mm-hmm. I don't believe the Blue Jays really benefited. We benefited by unloading salary. Yeah. And then losing 100 games the next year under Redmond. But, you know, so many trades don't happen. We had Brad Penny traded 10 times. Every deadline, he was our famous poach trade bait, which means at the end of every deadline, what we used to do is we would put together a dream trade, like a ridiculous trade where we had not been talking to this team about this player, and we would call the team and say, listen, we got an idea. How about Brad Penny and blank for blank? Just out of nowhere. Is there anyone else out there nimble enough who's willing to entertain a trade like that at 3:30 before a 4 o'clock deadline? And those never came to fruition. The GM who is really good at returning favors like that was Dave Dombrowski. Always very nimble, always willing to work quickly. Certain GMs we'd laugh at when we'd call because they can't function. They need to contemplate their navel for 2 days. It's funny. There are some GMs that they're just scared of making mistakes. I was never scared. And boy, did we make mistakes, but I was never scared to make them because we did the analysis that all 30 teams, you have to ignore the media, which says that we're the farm system for the rest of Major League Baseball. Everyone would say that about the Marlins. So we would keep a list of other players on teams who used to come from other teams. And every team had players who they'd given up on, who ended up being great for a different team. So we never let that impact us.
On a similar note, on terms of in honor of Griffin being called up, were there certain prospects in your experience that internally, right on the cusp of their debut, you were convinced were going to be stars or just longtime big leaguers that really fell on their faces? Any notable examples of ones that you had a lot of excitement and conviction about once they were called up and it just didn't click for them?
Well, most of that is my fault because we would call players up and put them in positions to fail, and we would call them up too early because we got so impatient. But two names that are names maybe the audience has never heard of. There was a pitcher named Logan Kensing, and he was so good. He was a pitcher, and we just abused him. We brought him up too early. We brought him up in a situation where it didn't work for him, and then we would send him up and down. Brad Hand is another great example. Totally screwed him up by the way we dealt with him. Graham Taylor's another one. He had great command. We brought him up too early. We put him in a situation where he lost his command. And if you look back, I think he lost his career. Boy, did we screw that one up. We screwed up so many. But again, before you say, my God, the worst president in the history of baseball, make sure you go to other teams and look around, because every team screws up prospects because it's so hard for prospects to make it. But I certainly can think of examples where we should have done better because we thought they'd be better. That's funny to make me think about that. I haven't thought about Logan Kensing in a really long time. Sorry, Logan, if you're watching. I really am sorry.
Well, David, we sort of spoke a little bit yesterday about, you and today as well, but you returning to loanDepot Park, and that you think that the approval rating for you is higher than most people would think. And I would be part of that approval segment of the population. I'm curious, not that it would happen, but if, let's say, you were shown on the Jumbotron welcoming you back to loanDepot Park next week, what do you think the reception would be? Would it be mostly positive or mostly negative? What do you think it would be?
I would assume that the 4,000 people in the ballpark would have the same view of me as usual, which is a smattering of boos and then a smattering of cheers and then a smattering majority of people like, who's that guy? So I never really paid much attention to cheers or the boos, the way I don't pay attention much to the criticisms or the applause, because I don't believe that you can ignore one without ignoring the other. I don't want to be the person who only believes the positive and ignores the negative, because that's delusional. And I don't want to be the person who only believes the negative and ignores the positive, because that's depressing. So I chose just to always ignore them both throughout my career. And it has served me really well in the social media age, where Dan Le Batard would just say that I'm full of wires. And I would say it's not that at all. It's that I'm able to put blinders on and sort of ignore the noise and do my job. And that's what I've always done.
Interesting. Well, hopefully in this next week, you make that return and you see exactly how that experience unfolds for you and that reception for you, David. But we appreciate the time on here. We enjoy the podcast, listening on a regular basis. A lot of insight, not just about the Marlins, of course, but the entire world of sports business. And so keep it up, and we'll talk again soon in the future.
You guys,
Isaac,
don't take your platform for granted. You guys are doing great, and just you got to keep going. Remember, I started Nothing Personal. The only listener was my mother, and literally, and it's now grown into what it is, and it keeps growing. Just don't give up if you can. Most people do, but your content and the way you do it is professional and smart and interesting, and I hope you guys keep going.
Thanks a lot, David. Yeah, but was Isaac Azut, Eli Sussman here, David Samson from Nothing Personal with David Samson here on the official show, Fish on First, wherever you find Fish on First on your podcast distribution channels, and fishonfirst.com for all our coverage down for this final month of this Marlins season with Griffin Conine and all the other various storylines surrounding this team at all levels. We got you covered. As always, go Fish.